It's a real pleasure to welcome Xavier home from the CSIRO. Xavier's a very well-known and active computer graphics person around Melbourne. You hosted the computer graphics
on a web meetup, yeah.
Yep. And he's very generously agreed to come over and give us a talk on his actual work that he does at CSIRO. So thank you, Xavier. Looking forward to what you've got to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. I actually had the pleasure to invite John to one of our meetups back mid last year to give a talk on your work. So in a sense, I'm kind of giving back to the community in a different community. But it's good to be here in a new room that's well air conditioned. It's a bit hot outside. It's a bit rainy outside. Hopefully there's going to be rainbows, which is over there. I'm blocking it. I was on a flight from Sydney back to Melbourne, and I saw this, and I was like, Melbourne is right there. And there was this cloud over, and I was like, so I took that photo 3-4 months ago, and today I feel like it's the right day. Maybe it's by accident. I didn't think today is going to be the day they're announcing the results, but I'm very happy, so woo. Yeah, my boyfriend who's watching online, he'll be very happy too. So I also realized a year ago, I gave a talk at UNSW on the same day, actually, in half an hour from now. 1 year ago, I gave a talk on interaction design. So the talk that I'm going to cover today is completely different. So if you want to look at the more principles, guidelines, methodologies on designs, interaction design, I would welcome you to check out the website, and there's a whole slides available. I'm going to be focusing on more the design process and thought processes, and also the little steps that I take through in my work. So the two talk hopefully complement each other. Okay, so to introduce myself, I'm terrible at the bar. I'm not a kind of crowdy person. I like to be quiet. At some point, though, you go to a bar because, socializing, and someone will just say, oh, yeah, wow, what do you do at CSIRO? Xavier, that's cool. I'll be like, oh, I do, data visualizations. That's my job. And they give me this confused look right away, just to go, oh, what do you do? And so I say, well, I'm a designer and a programmer, which they thought I'm a nerdier version of Napoleon Dynamite mixed with perhaps Peter Dion or some other guy. It's like, how does that work? You're a programmer and a designer, what? And they say, oh, sorry. And then they say, oh, so like Excel? Is that what you do? And I'll be like, no, I actually don't know any Excel. If you want to learn Excel, talk to the finance people, they're great. I just know how to sort and maybe color stuff, but I know nothing about Excel. I do a lot of data-driven work with programming, and I feel like a lot of my processes are perhaps a bit too narrow. So when I try to teach my methodology to other people, I kind of have to prepend it and say, well, if you don't know Python or JavaScript, it's a bit more difficult. So today I've decided that I'm going to make my slides code-free. There's no code, and I'm going to give you as much insights and tools you can take away as possible just by the way that you can take on the thought processes in your work. And that can be in communication, in data visualization, in working out, talking to the client and explaining the project goals, and all of these will be transferable. So a bit more about myself. I'm doing a PhD at the University of Sydney, game jams and idea networks, and it's another sort of area I won't go into, but it's pretty nice to be able to apply data visualization on the different games that's coming out in the last 25 years in roguelike games, for example. I'm also a big fan of hackathons, so I won a competition with 4 people I've never met before. It's really great, actually, to see someone mentoring students and both in the professionals in the same team. That was awesome. I also love design sprints. If you're doing any design sprints for like a day or 2 or 5 days, let me know. I'll jump in for 2 hours if I can. So that was at the Melbourne SensiLab, talking about how we can better engage citizens who's already engaged, but want to make sure that what we're doing is well communicated to the people around that council. I also like to role play. I like to say that I'm a dragon who pretends to be human in real life. I'm a graphics geek, as John has alluded to. I love to play with mixed reality, computer graphics, and this is sort of like a photo I just kind of mimicked the Game Boy, original Game Boy style look, adhering to the whole 4 bits, or rather 4 different grayscales and green and stuff like that. This is me in the States. I actually don't remember why I put that photo in there, but there it is. I started archery 7 weeks ago, which is interesting. It's a pretty chill sport. If you want to do some sports that you want to be super antisocial, talk to nobody, and you don't want to run, not even to chase after the ball, archery is great. You only have to walk 10 meters. You pick up the arrow and come back, and you can move on to 15 meters and 20 meters, and it's very chill. I also love conferences, so I like to give talks. And in a way, last year, I set myself a goal to practice as a public speaker as much as I can. So I put up to my boss. He was pretty happy. So since then, I'm trying to submit the talk to a meetup or a conference wherever I can. And that was really lucky that through, I guess, friends of friends and saying, hey, Xavier, come and talk about mixed reality on the web. So I'm like, yes, it was really awesome. So these are me. I do lots of things. But today, I would like to focus on data visualization and what I do at CSIRO, right? So why data visualization? Oh, by the way, the sun symbol is actually a note to me that I was going to give you demos. But since I'm standing here and not where the laptop is, you just have to deal with screenshots, OK? So why data visualization? It's a thing that people like to do and have no money for and no time for. They can see, well, it'd be nice to do this shiny animation or have this tool, but we can't sell it. It's not something we can just put in money and then directly sell it, apply it to our client, right? It's so hard to justify. Why would you pay someone another full-time salary like myself and then do data visualization? It's not something that we're all working on. It's not solving critical problems. It's just displaying it a bit prettier. Like, why would you do it? Well, the thing is you get this. You see this a lot. This is color of our ocean measured since, I think, 1901. I don't want to get this wrong. Maybe 1895. It's a long time ago, until about 2013. So there used to be, and it's still pretty strong, this measurement index called Ferrari Index, which is a 21 color scale. It used to be on a wooden board and with transparent color stripes on both the cut through as well as an opaque on the wood. You just hold up to a water body and compare to say what is the color of my ocean. And back 100 years ago, that was a pretty awesome tool that now they can say, hey, this is brown, that's red, what's in the water. Now they have some indicator to talk about our ocean more than just, oh, it smells bad or it's probably unhealthy, right? So things like that, which I see as a data visualization practitioner, I see that as an overplotting problem. So you can't really tell what's going on. Besides that, we have a lot of data, which is great. Why now, right? The other aspect you see a lot is people say, the whole, we have this text thing and then it's really inaccessible. Well, it's not. You can search through it if you know what you're doing. But if you want to get a quick sense of what you're looking for, that's a really terrible way to look at your data set. If you at least put it in Excel, I'm terrible at it, but I can get a line chart, you'll get a much better idea of what's going on, right? So a large part of data visualization is to get yourself into the data, get your head around it as quickly as possible before being able to then form a conversation to your clients, to your stakeholders, to your collaborators about what this data is really telling us. So it helps both ways, and I think lots of these things will be small things you can take with you. So some of my work is really well inspired by many great people before me, including John's work actually, but this one particular stands out because this whole book is focusing on not just the aesthetics of data visualization, which people immediately think about, wow, it looks really shiny, but also what is the function of data visualization? Why do we do it? What kind of things can we get out of it that will benefit reading, readability, things like that. So if you're interested in the data sets, for example, in Spain, I believe, and you're interested in unemployment, and you want to look at what's below average and above average, a simple two-color tone with lines pointing to each part of the country and a number, we'll do a quick overview, we'll do a pretty good job. And obviously, you would have to change how you display the data based on what data you're trying to say and tell, because you might be focused on, say, income, or you might be focused on mental health, for example. So you will tweak your data visualization based on the angle and aspect that you're trying to tell. But once you work out the questions that you want to answer, then it's pretty straightforward to work out what data needs to be on the paper. The other aspect that I'd be very inspired by is the work by Giorgia Lupi and Stefan. They did a year project, which you probably have seen their TED Talk, where they send each other postcards. It's kind of nice, where they just said, well, we really want to practice data visualization, but we just want to do it on the side for fun. So they just drew some stuff and then sent each other through a postcard over the ocean. And some of the cards looked like, how drunk was I in the morning on a Monday to evening on a Monday, and then the next day, where were they drinking and what were they thinking? And they just used simple color codings to kind of show it's not just about the summary, the statistics, but also what is the moment and how did it make him feel? How many of those data points are there? And can we do it iteratively? Can we do it by drawing? Can we do it all about people and then telling a story about what we're recording here? So they've since published a book called Dear Data, which I all recommend you to check it out. You can get it from the library. I got mine from UNSW, which is awesome. And the book records all the postcards plus the methodologies that I go through. It's really inspiring. So I recommend that. So science data visualization. I've talked about a lot of database. Why apply to science? And so when you think about any problem, it doesn't matter what problem it is. You think about the context in which the problem you're trying to solve. So for science, we're often trying to say, what is the hypothesis we're trying to prove? What are the different measurements and metrics we can collect over time, and how can it tell us an answer about the problem that we're trying to solve? How can we apply technology into something that can be beneficial for public good? Or how can we convince somebody who's in power of decision making that we've been collecting data, and you know what, seawater is rising, and you know what, temperature is rising, and how can we best convince them? So the context can really come from what are we measuring, what is the problem, who do they affect, and what data do you have to back it up? What kind of questions and criticisms will they have? Can you follow up to say, well, I've actually thought about that. This is the other part I prepared earlier, right? So, and also the limitations. What's the uncertainty? How much confidence do I have in this data? That all goes into the aspect of working as a scientist, right? You want to make sure that what you're working on, your methods are validated, and you can say that these are the aspects that I prove can be correct, at least given these backgrounds and assumptions that I'm making here. And this is the data I've collected. So the data visualization just kind of straight on piggybacks on that aspect of it. And I want to emphasize that you always want to go back to the context you're looking for. So if you're looking at robotics, if you're looking at transportation, what are the contexts and problems? Who are they affecting? What are you trying to convince? All of these are generalized problems that you can use and techniques that I hopefully will go into a little bit just by me doing a monologue in front of you. So one of the things that people don't often do is to just sit down in front of a blank sheet of paper and just draw some stuff. So one thing I like to do is really zen, because I'm an ambivert. I like to do by myself. Sometimes I like to chat, some other times. But when I'm by myself, I like to figure out what is the problem I'm solving. So for example, for this one, I'm looking at an albatross population. So they're like these endangered big birds that's all over Australia on the east and the south side. And we want to find out what different methodologies that we can implement in a local region, whether that's implementing a seawater, like a breakwater cliffside, or reduce the number of houses that's going to be built, reduce traffic and things like that, or improve protection on the local area. What are the different methodologies that people can produce, and what would that affect the population? For them, it's all about a number, so that's why there's kind of a wavy line here. For me, I was thinking about the interaction type and what kind of input can people put in, and what kind of output can come out of it, as well as the explanations. But you will see for each mockup that I do, it's going to be different, because different mockups and different projects have different questions that they're trying to answer. So for this one with Ion Water Australia, which is a project that's just starting to look at how can we engage citizen scientists to measure things like water color and other chemical trails in our ocean and inland waters, and better provide some kind of metrics that our satellites might not be able to pick up, or we might not have the funding or resources to send people to measure our lakes all the time. But they were more worried about how's the data architecture going to work? How are we going to be able to synchronize the database that's currently in the EU, which we have the project for, that to the one that we're going to spin up in Australia? What are the concerns that we're having? Can we reuse certain things? Can we have new things? If we're building visualization, where do they come from? And that is going to be continue to be iterated over time. People will give me feedback, and that's going to go on and on. But that one is only from yesterday, so this is only the first draft, and that will change a lot as we have more conversations with our clients. Another thing that I like to focus on is UI. So what am I displaying here? For this project, I was focusing on the air pollution that's coming from shipping around New South Wales coast, as well as the bushfire smokes that can be observed on satellites. So they wanted to build some kind of shiny publication thing and say, we want to put this at a conference, we're going to make everyone woo. And I was trying to think, okay, what does that mean? What kind of data do you have, and what is smoke? Like, how does that affect us? So I did some research, onto the WHO guidelines on the website, as well as talking to the scientists. As it turns out, these little things called PM 2.5 and PM10, 2.5 micrometers, tiny things that's a fifth thickness compared to the average human hair size. They're so small that your car and air condition wouldn't normally filter out. And a quality filter that you can buy to filter things out, like these, are thousands of dollars. No one will usually have them in their house. And there's research that's been proven that there's a correlation of people who's constantly exposed to a high concentration of PM 2.5 has a 40% higher chance of getting lung cancer. So things like this, we know they happen in bushfires, and we know they're happening being produced by ships and traffic and things like that. Where do they go? How much concentration do they have in Australia? So I started to dig into the different mission statements and the different reasons why we're doing these things, as well as the interaction types that people can play with the website, and then just trying to work out what if it on the mobile, who's going to browse this website, is it more for the public, or is it for a government person, things like that. So I just try to jot my stuff down, just not trying to be less self-conscious, not going to judge myself, and just going to put stuff down. And eventually I can take out the stuff that I like or my clients liked, and we can work out a compromise. And that's going to, these kind of things would really help you drive the conversations. So maybe sometimes you might be thinking about, well, we have all these data sets, what kind of ways can we visualize it, right? So I like to do that with am I talking about some kind of ring chart which could mimic age like trees? Or could it be more of a network chart with other things? And this was a conversation to talk about publications in CSRO. So we wanted to find out in a business unit, a group, a team, what kind of area do they publish in and how do they relate to other teams? And so we're trying to figure out, just coming up with as many ideas as possible, how we can best highlight the different categories and how would someone go in and search into this database and what would they get out of it as well. So I've talked a lot about sketching. So let's probably look at another that's more sketchy, but more to be what you were expecting. Sometimes you can do very detailed sketches with a ruler. Don't be afraid, it's not cheating. Just go ahead and draw and stuff. And you can kind of, just draw some quick sketches to figure out what is really the thing you're building. It doesn't have to be completely 100% detail that you're trying to recreate, but the more details you can put in, a better idea someone will be able to read from it without having to come back to you for questions, right? So this one was to look at a temperature in a lake, and then so there's depth and there's over time, and we were trying to figure out the different kinds of things that's going in there. But that one was an early thing that was scraped pretty much right away because it was too confusing. What is this and what is that? Why are they two different charts, and do they belong to that one? And there's a lot of problems with these charts. But until you've drawn something and shown to someone, I haven't implemented anything, I haven't written a single line of code. Scientists will quickly tell you, actually, I really don't like the fact that you have a vertical line on the left and on the right, and they're completely different units, where I don't know how to read this chart by that point, right? So things like this can be sussed out quite early on. So, quick break. I'm going through this quite quickly because I have a lot to go through. So if you haven't seen a movie called The Red Turtle, please go see it. It came out last year. It's really great. 90 minutes of no dialogue. It's the most beautiful film I've seen about the force of nature. So really recommend it. Okay, deep breath. Next. This is going to be an obvious point. It's really important to ask for feedback. But there's a couple of things that I do that people will go, wow, that's a really cool trick. So I want to share with you about my techniques for asking for feedback. You can round robin people who you ask for feedback. What I do is I kind of mentally bucket, and this is kind of an idea stolen directly from one of my game developer friends. You have your direct client, your collaborators. You have your coworkers and colleagues who you're legally allowed to share. You have your friends and family who you can tell a little bit depending on the project, but they have a different point of view, and they're going to come from a completely fresh perspective. What you can do is you can round robin to them and say, hey, my week 1 might be my clients. I've done some markup. Week 3, I'm going to go to my colleagues. I've done some more work. What do you think? Week 4, go to my family and friends, do some quick fixes. Week 5, go back to my clients. By the time they've seen it, you've done 2 or 3 revisions. There's a lot more things you've done and thought about that they have hopefully more things to show you or tell you about. Because if you only make a tiny change, they'll be like, well, yeah, you made that thing red. That's great. They just have nothing else to say. So I find that having different groups, you can go and ask for feedback, and they'll give you, technical feedback, visual feedback, understanding, comprehension, things like that. It's pretty good. So really recommend that. And also, this is really hard to do, keeping up the momentum. It's really good even if you just say 2 weeks later, hey, I've done something quick. It's just a sketch that I was thinking about, well, how am I going to organize the next stage of the project? It doesn't have to be another new code base you've written or things you've implemented. It can just be ideas. And if you can visualize and draw the ideas like I've shown you before, you're going to keep up the momentum, and people will know that you're thinking about it. And hopefully, they'll give you some more feedback before you even go in and implement it. And also, this is another thing that it's really hard. I've noticed a lot of people, when they're going to give or ask for feedback, they end up rebuttaling their clients' feedback and say, well, I thought of this, but it's actually this. You're really there to listen. So I want to stress this point that when you're asking for feedback, you are saying, I want to listen to what you have to say. This is what I got, and these are the backgrounds. Can you please have a look and then tell me what you think? And then by that point, you should just shut up. At least I'm telling myself to shut up and then just listen. Because what they're going to say is going to be the most important, and you don't want to cut off their thought processes, which could be quite valuable. And sometimes they won't hit the important spots until 5 minutes later. So let them have time to think and have time to speak. Okay, next bit beyond mockups. So this is a really cool way to show you how different mockups can be done. This is done in Photoshop. I have not written a single line of code, right? So what I've done is I kind of took the UI sketches and say, how am I going to have a look? I don't really know. Well, we know it's Earth. Maybe I want to have a spacey feel. So I just kind of slapped on the, that's from the Google WebGL from 2009. I just took the Earth from it and just drew some random squares. You can easily fake that it's there. And then just kind of copied it and then made a different color on the right-hand side to pretend that it's like some kind of user interaction navigation thing. And then just put down, what am I going to say here? Is it about the pollution? Is it about what we know? Is it about how can you do anything about it? And then trying to figure out how am I going to use the different footers and what are the different follow-ups that people can do. And you can quickly do this if you're proficient in graphics design or if you're proficient in other, it doesn't matter what you can just be watercolor if that's what you want. I think people would really love a watercolor markup. But things like this would let people know that you are thinking about not only the functionality, you're not only thinking about the context and inputs and the problems that you're trying to solve, but also the look and feel, which some people will have a strong opinion of, and doesn't take that much to do. And you will find that once you have this thing down pat, it will save you a lot more time in the future to go back and forth trying to decide how your app is going to look or how your data report is going to look. So sometimes I do program because I just wanted to quickly find out what I can do to make something work. And usually it's a technical thing. So in this case, it's back to the Albatross, the Big Birds project. And then I'm just trying to say these are the different techniques and plans that they've got on their report. And they have done simulations in their models, which they gave me as an Excel file, which I have, OK. Trying to work out how I can put that on the chart. And just by simply trying to implement something that I had to go look at a tutorial, but you can do it if you go sit down and teach yourself how to code. If you have the foundations, you can usually work out how to use a library, right? So in this case, I'm just hiding and showing stuff. It's ugly. But it got the point across. People see that they can actually now head towards a storytelling kind of tool in a very primitive way to say, I've got this thing. What happens when we delay our plan by 5 years? What happens if we improve the juvenile survival plus the things that's done before? And you can see the population change. And there's a couple of flaws, like you don't really know what you're selecting because they're black and things like that. But they can see that you've got the capability to build a tool that they can interact with. So coding can be really cool if you are really proficient. So this is, again, the temperature with the lake thing. In this case, the client has given me some feedback and said, it might be better to have, again, not having something on the right-hand side, but also the temperature, they're more interested in the distribution over the depth than anything else. And so they wanted to see the distribution, what's the minimum, maximum, things like that. And then I just kind of putting a little bit of a timeline dragging thing that they can kind of see the different data points at different time. It's still early work, but building these kind of things doesn't take you that much time once you've done enough of them. And it gets the point across. So sometimes my work is really, doesn't have to be climate science. That's the one to do with publication networks. Eventually, we worked out that it might be cool to separate the different field of research codes, which is well-defined in the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And then you can say, I can produce some kind of really easy heat map to say if there's darker, there's more publications. You can actually mouse over to see what they are, how many they are over time. So you can then aggregate them over a person, a group, a team. It's really not well polished, but they really liked this one for some reason. So I just kind of left it because I only had like 2 weeks to work on it. Sometimes good enough is good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. So yeah, more stuff. You can go crazy. So in this case, they're looking at lake quality. But what they got an idea of was that we've got satellites all over Australia and all over the world. Can we use the satellite information, also called remote sensing, to get a better preview of what's the current health of the lake? So in this case, they're approximating turbidity, or how clear, how muddy the water body is. As it turns out, turbidity is a pretty okay estimator for how much algae there are in the water body. So if there's too much of those green mossy stuff, you might be suffocating your fish underneath there. You might be producing too much crap. And it can be toxic to drink depending on the species of algae as well. So in this case, I just slap the map on the left-hand side and have some panel on the right-hand side. And it's another line chart, right? Like really, it's just line chart with an area coloring thing. They've came up with some early metrics to say, well, what's really not good, as in, if it's red, don't drink this, go somewhere else, to like, yellow, watch this out, and green to be like, yeah, use it at your own caution, that kind of thing. So they were able to come up with some kind of approximator for about 6 to 8 months of going back and forth with different scientists and computing. And in the meantime, I was building, stuff that I can take some result, showing on the map. And this blue thing is the satellite schedule, which they requested on the last day, so I didn't have time, but I can at least slap it on and say in 6 days, that's where the satellite photo will be taken. Anyway, so you can search on any lake in New South Wales in this case, and then you can just scrub through time and figure out how the lake is doing. And what they're interested in this one was that if it's red, or they see that trend is going towards red, they really need to send someone then to the lake and collect some water samples to figure out how severe, what kind of species are in these waters. And this kind of cuts down the cost a lot because they don't have to send people to every single lake ever. They don't have the resources to do that. We have over 2,000 lakes in New South Wales. So tools like this is really helpful, actually. There's all kinds of reasons why you want to be able to just search a lake and drill down, which can apply to any kind of data set. More maps. This is a project that we worked on for about a year or so, and currently it's being everywhere. It was supposed to be announced by Barnaby Joyce, our former, right, Prime Minister, who's not there anymore. And our current Prime Minister is also the Agriculture Prime Minister or Minister. This is a traffic modeling of agricultural commodity, which we were really excited, and I think it's being white papered anyway, so it'll be announced at some point. In terms of the white paper, I can show you the viz because the viz is not under embargo. So what the problem was that we've got so many roads in Australia. We have trucks going all over. If you ever drove interstate, there are trucks everywhere, and quite scary actually to be driving between trucks. But we have lots of road authorities like Vic Roads and Transport for New South Wales and so on. They're constantly making plans to widen a road, to seal a road, to build a new road, and so on. But they don't really know exactly how that affects our businesses in agriculture when it comes to transport. Because we have so many farms that's in rural Australia, they have to say beef, so cows, right? You have to grow the cow, you have to send the cow to processing, usually. Processing comes out in boxes and sealed components and other things. And then those things get sent to storage or freezer or further processing, export, supermarket. You can imagine how the supply chain might go for a kind of commodity in agriculture and horticulture. So what this was that we worked out a supply chain, at least the people at CSIRO worked out over time by talking to different bodies. And they also know the locations for the enterprises, so the farms, the processing places, factories, export. We know the roads, we know the rail interchange and things like that. And we know also the annual demand and supply by the month. So if we know each supermarket, what their demand, or I guess the throughput, the maximum amount of beef they can storage and sell, as well as the farm, how much beef they can produce. And you also know how big each beef box container, shall we say, are, how heavy they are, but also how many boxes can fit in a truck. And so if a farm can supply 100,000 heads of cow for a year, you can work out how many trucks that need to go from that farm to some other place. So then you can start to get an idea of how much traffic there is in terms of trucks going through Australia. So they've done lots of runs. This is just a base scenario of the different kinds of commodities. And here I've just done a high categories like dairy, which is cow and things, milk, grain, livestock, which also includes cows, I think. The different roads have different volumes, so they go from low to high. And there's also different enterprises that's marked in dots. And it's just a really quick way to say, if I'm interested in the Hume Highway or the little shipping route between Melbourne and Devonport to Tasmania, I can kind of click on a thing and kind of get a quick idea of how many oranges are going through in terms of per tons, or how many cows, beef are going through in terms of per tons and things like that. So that was like stage one, and it's currently being shown, well, it's been through to Indonesia, which is kind of interesting. I have a photo here as well. I wasn't there, but my colleague Steve is on a microphone over there. He gave this to the transport minister in Indonesia, which I'm like, wow, okay. It's exciting. It'll get there somewhere. So sometimes the project can go to crazy places, as I'm trying to say. You don't realize it until later. Anyway, moving on. So I've got my Microsoft HoloLens sitting just behind there, and I've got a mixed reality experience if you want to stay after, have a chat with me, and check out a smoke simulation, so similar to the smoke and fire that you've seen before, but this time with a digital elevation model of Victoria, or part of Victoria and Tasmania. And the smoke comes in 16 different stacks from 10 meters to 200 meters above ground level. And you can see that those blue things which have changed now in the app are like rocky pillars. They're weather stations. So once the smoke goes through, they light up to measure the amount of PM2.5, the different things that's going through the atmosphere at different elevations as well. But the weather stations are just ground level. And that was a bushfire that occurred in January 2016. So you can work out if there's amount of bushfire smoke that's been measured by the satellite. You can model where the smoke goes with wind. And that goes actually quite pretty far. It goes to New South Wales and eventually Brisbane over like a month. But the model I got in the HoloLens is only 7 days. So it only goes to Victoria, well, Melbourne, kind of Greater Melbourne and back. But it's still pretty like incredible to see how far certain things can go. And it gives you a different perspective. So I've gone through a lot of things, and I know I probably only have spent like maybe 18 minutes. How am I doing on time?
You're okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty okay, right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about a quick guide to develop data viz. So I shamelessly stole this from a book called Design for Real Life, and the original title was called Develop 8 Arguments. If you're interested in that, it was pretty cool. But it's the same points that I brought up earlier at the beginning of the talk. So, what is the message you're trying to say? What is the intention? Why you're doing this visualization? And what is the point? What are the data you've got to support your case? How is this data visualization relevant to your audience? And what would they get out of it from their point of view? What's the context you're solving? What are the approaches you're taking to demonstrate the data viz that you're trying to do? That can be from a visual metaphor point of view, which I talk about in the other talk, as well as the physical real-world context. What are the different subjects you're trying to link together to tell a story? What are the limitations that your data has intrinsically, as well as your data visualization? What are the different things that you haven't thought about, or things you cannot show due to visual data reasons? You have to qualify that. And also, lastly, to anticipate the other person's questions when they have seen your data visualization or when they have read your report, whatever it is. You want to be able to put in something that, I see someone's taking a photo, I'll wait for a bit. You want to be able to design your data viz so that you can anticipate and respond to their questions. So I've always thought that that's a really cool way to develop an argument, but also guess what? A really cool way to develop a data visualization. So I hope that will stay with you. If nothing else, this is really cool. At least I thought it was. So in closing, I know I've gone through lots of things quickly. Programming is actually creative work. If you're a programmer, I don't know if you are, feel free to go crazy. You don't have to contain yourself in database land or in console land. You can just use matplotlib, ggplot, different kind of libraries to do cool things, or even D3.js if you're in the JavaScript land. It's about creating something new. It's about problem solving. So we already know programming is creative in that aspect, but you can also apply it to something else. You don't have to limit yourself. I'm trying to put that out here. Being creative is a skill. Some people say that, oh, I'm not creative, therefore I'm going to leave the idea and decision-making to some other people, and I'm just going to do what I know best, do what I do best. But actually, being creative is a skill, and skills can be taught and learned. If you constantly force yourself maybe 10 minutes a week just to think about something new, read as much as you can, do a bit of side projects in your current projects if you have time, try to think outside of the boundaries of your current constraint and say, what if this happens? Sometimes the thing you do in those areas can be persuasive for your colleagues and clients to adapt something quite new that they haven't thought about before. And oftentimes, they won't say yes. They won't be approachable until they've seen something. So it really takes that, someone to initiate themselves to say, I'm going to do this first and prove it to them that this is viable. And also, I want to say that even if you don't know how to code, pen and paper, man, it's just sit down and draw. It's if you have a ruler, you can draw straight lines. The circles you've seen before, I got those button pins you can get, just like trace a circle. Like you don't have to be a perfect circle drawer. You can do that, right? And doing that will give you so much more ideas because now you're A, not in front of a computer, which is super distracting. And B, when someone sees you're on a piece of paper and drawing, they know you're busy. I don't know why, like when I'm at work, if I'm looking at the computer and coding, obviously coding, they think they can just come and say, hey, Xavier, can I talk to you about the bread that I just made yesterday? I'm like, and now I have to go back and think about my code after 10 minutes of talking about bread. And yeah, for some reason, if you just sit down and draw, people know you're busy. They won't tap on your shoulder. And I don't have to wear a headset. I just have my lamp shining on my A3 paper, which I took from my printer in the office, and just draw some stuff. No one bothers me, so it's great. You can use this trick to get some quiet time. Yeah, so thank you for listening to me rant. And you can get me on Twitter. I prefer emails over mobile phone calls if possible. Feel free to chat with me about data viz, creative coding, anything like that. And thank you for giving me the time and space to chat.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
You're all smarter than me. Very quiet. Oh, there's one, Richard.
Beautiful facility here. The screen's amazing. I'm actually interested in your opinion about augmented reality and what's happening in iOS and the ability for people to examine dynamic data through a small window as opposed. I mean, it's amazing like this, but what do you think the potential is for the small screen dynamic?
Yeah. The small screen dynamic, that's a really cool term. I'm going to borrow that. There are a couple things that I have a lot of opinions about augmented reality, but from my experience at work, we've noticed that AR and VR and other kind of shiny new gadgets are super attractive at conferences. If you set up a VR zone at your booth or your table, or you bring in something that's obviously something that no one can see until they put on something, you get a long line, like coming to your booth. So if you want to have lots of audiences at a conference, AR is great. You will get lots of audience talking to you about stuff. From a practical point of view, it's going to be a long way from now for anyone who's doing precise practical work in the mass scale. Like unless you spend millions of dollars building robotic arms that can do heart surgery, and they've done that in virtual reality and proven quite successfully, because human hands, turns out, shake a lot more than robots do. You can do work like that, but when you're talking about putting data, putting things in the AR sense, and then trying to get, say, architects or, say, a scientist or a biologist to look at it and then do some decision making, we have a long way to go. And that could be because we don't have the precision to display the data sets as detailed as I would like. It could be because we don't have the tools to say, I want to load up any arbitrary CSV and show me something in augmented reality. That doesn't make sense, right? On the other side, though, we found that with AR at least, it's a really good thing to complement your primary work. Because when you think about solving real-world problems, if we're trying to, say, sequence the human genome or sequence some kind of molecules that you're trying to understand, so it could be a polymer of some kind, you want to be able to show the proper sequence where your unknown zones are and things like that in as detailed as you can, given the power tools, if they're the bioinformaticians that will be very interested and useful and used to doing those things. But having some other ways to show them, you can rotate around the molecule and then see what's unknown, what's known, and you can kind of go into it and leave a note. I think that's kind of neat from a novel point of view. And usually you can drive interesting conversations with it. But that's about it at the moment to where it goes. There are some really valid ways of using AR we've seen, like with IKEA showing you the virtual furniture that you can display in your home before you buy. Those are really cool cases. But those cases are still, I think, far and great in between. So I always have seen that, at least from the AR point of view, it's great for conferences, great to complement your current work, but you have to have a really solid use case. I think, was it Ray-Ban, the sunglasses company, now they have a website which you can go to, you can try out glasses before you buy them as well. So that's just using the iPhone X's face recognition. It does quite well, a good job to put some glasses you can change to different styles. So those are awesome use cases. But really think it through. Why would someone go through an AR experience just to try your app? Are they going to get something out of it? Or is it just something that's shiny and then they have no takeaways? So I think that will apply to both AR and other things. But AR is still weak because we don't have the tooling yet to do that. So I hope that answers the question. Anything else? Hi.
So we've had a bit of a theme in the lab recently about kind of telling stories through the data visualization and stuff like that. And I mean, you're hinting at that. Even this, you've kind of got a bit of a narrative about things. Are you finding increasingly you've got to kind of think of the story, the narrative that you need to tap into to have impact?
Yeah,
Visualization?
definitely. One thing that I'm still really bad at is to show people a data visualization with a heading. Because if you just see a chart, you'll go, wow, that looks really cool. What is this thing about? What am I looking at? I find that storytelling is a complicated world, and I'm not a data journalist. I don't have the storytelling background. I try to apply the techniques in, I guess, role-playing, because that's what I do. So I try to set the scene. What's the current challenge? What do we have? And who are the main heroes? In this case, it could be the data viz. So I may have some good examples somewhere else, but if I show you this, you have no idea what you're looking at, right? Like if I didn't tell you it's traffic, it's in agriculture, if you didn't have a chance to interact with it, you've got no idea. So sometimes storytelling needs to be driven by a storyteller. Like not all data viz can be sort of automated. You can just sit someone through and experience unguided. You can curate an experience like a railroad kind of thing and just guide them through certain aspects. But I think it all comes down back to, like how are you going to tell a story so that they get a point? And that sometimes might mean that you have to really spell out what you're trying to say or the different points that you're trying to stress during that time that you have while you have their attention. So it's almost like I think about storytelling as a technique in itself, then I apply to data viz. I haven't really quite synthesized the two well enough to give you a rounded answer yet. Another question?
But maybe just on that topic,
Yeah.
this is sort of just more a question of process within the CSIRO. So how do you go about doing these visualizations? Do people come to you and say, we need something that does this? Or do you say, oh, we've got this great data, let's make a visualization? How does it work?
So it's very case by case. We've seen cases where we've got someone say, we've got a scatter plot. It's really useful. We're all using it. We used it from Google Sheets, right? And they're plotting some kind of thing that X and Y, they can choose different attributes. Then they say, we have 300 million rows. Google Sheets can't display that. And we have trouble getting them on the chart. And I'm like, well, okay, thinking to myself, we can do this, but 300 million points, okay? And then we really have to ask them the question, so what is the problem you're having? Do you think that having 300 million points in a chart, which would be, quite frankly, crowded, would that solve your problem? Or is the problem really like you have trouble filtering down because you can't even import 300 million rows in Google Sheet, right? So it often takes a bit of a poking and say, what is the problem you're having? And how can we best help you to overcome some barrier that you're having? Because they're coming to us for a reason. We want to find out what that true barrier is. See if we can tackle it by using an existing software. We've got HPCs at CSIRO, and we can also tackle the one at NCI. Or it could just be something that we can develop in-house and that they can use for their use case, which is quite rare. We try to find built tools if we can. That saves us time. But yeah, it would really depend on the case that comes through, if that answers the question.
So in the case of the transport on the road network,
Sure.
I mean, obviously that's had big political outcome in a way. Is that sort of how you go about thinking? Like this is for politicians to use, so we have to think about the way we visualize it this way, or is it just sort of interested in the design process if that's affected by the audience?
Yeah, that's something I'm trying to push. So I've spoken to the Brisbane City Council. I've spoken to who's the other person? I forgot. I think it's someone from New South Wales. And they've seen the tool. They really liked it. But when you're in those events, like at a conference, the conversation time is very short. So I haven't really got a good insight about what they see out of this from their point of view, especially if it's political. Internally, we have lots of people who are on the managing group leader level where they're pretty across the political implications. So I generally try to poke them because they're a lot more available for me. And they would say, yeah, like baselines like this are fine, but we totally never share things like if you can compare, say, within the same industry, someone would have some data about some suburb and someone else wants to see how that suburb is going because they might be using those roads. Those things we never share. So our data is like, while it's detailed to some way, that's only the baseline. There's no modification to the current thing. So we're trying to say, if someone wants to add a road or trying to build a business somewhere else, they won't have the business advantage just by simply having access to this tool. It's more of a thing for road decision makers who wants to build improved roads. They already know that there are trucks going on, but they just want to have some more data set to figure out if we have a new road going from here to here, what's the cost savings for all the trucks that's coming through, or the number of hours that the trucks have to drive on, things like that. And there's a lot of things we have to fine tune as well. Like at the moment, the data set is all kind of unified in some way, and we can compare the base with another scenario. But then by that point, you will have to go in and manually do another run, take screenshots, and put into reports. So we're not quite at the level where we can just give it to someone. So that's still internal use in some way, and let them just play with it. We're not ready for that yet. So lots of those things will have to be sussed out that we still have to answer. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, let's thank Xavier once again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So because my computer is not hooked up, I was hoping to be able to do a stream, but is it possible that you can